we are doing something weird and interesting, and I think a lot more promising, because we're pulling the carbon out from the natural gas before it's even combusted, which means CO2 never gets created in the first place, which is, first of all, really good. And second of all, what we're left with is actually solid carbon.
I know one of the things you also do is sequester carbon.
Yeah, that's right.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this too. So we pull the carbon out of hydrogen, right? And the big question is, what do you do with the carbon? Generally, this issue that we're using a lot of fossil fuels and we need to avoid the CO2 going into the atmosphere, many folks have worked on it already. Usually what people are trying to do is to capture the CO2 in its gaseous form. That takes a lot of energy to capture, but that's an offending thing you want to get rid of. And then since CO2 is not particularly useful, it's used in niche applications, like things like, actually like a Coca-Cola bottle, right? There's some CO2 that forms the bubbles. But generally, the solution is to spend a lot of money to inject it into used up oil and gas wells and to try to keep it underground and hope it doesn't bubble back up.
Yeah, just bury it, yeah.
If you just hear that story, you understand this is really hard, right? It's a gas. Of course it wants to bubble back up, even if you store it in the ground. But that's the ideas that folks have thought of so far. However, we are doing something weird and interesting, and I think a lot more promising, because we're pulling the carbon out from the natural gas before it's even combusted, which means CO2 never gets created in the first place, which is, first of all, really good. And second of all, what we're left with is actually solid carbon. So here, just to bring some props, right? Here's a jar of the carbon that modern hydrogen has captured. You can look, it's just literally, powdery carbon. To blow your mind, right? I think one of the reasons why we've been so slow to address CO2, because we've been treating the atmosphere as a giant waste dump. CO2, also a gas, it's invisible, so you don't really see how much you're polluting. But this jar of carbon is equivalent to the CO2 that your home heating furnace would have created in just 30 seconds. So just in every 30 seconds, you're dumping like this much CO2 equivalents into the atmosphere.
Wow.
So that's why global warming is happening, right? Like you think, oh, the Earth's ginormous, how can human beings affect it? But we are dumping so much CO2 into the atmosphere. So, but yeah, like the neat thing, right? Because it's a carbon, this is a useful material that's actually already used in the economy. The specific name of the term is a material called carbon black. It's about, I think last year, a $17 billion per year commodity, been used in many applications. So for example, just to show you some things, right? Today, like our biggest market application is in asphalt. You know how roads are black? It's because it has a lot of carbon in it. So we just basically sell our carbon for roads. And this carbon is just locked in as a solid in the roads. That'll never turn back into CO2. It's a bit heavy, but like this is like a sample of the asphalt we can create with the carbon that we've sequestered. Today, we have carbon in asphalt, in roads and driveways and stuff like that in projects, California, Oregon, Washington. I think another use for carbon is actually ink. If you've ever seen like the black powder in your printer, that's because it's carbon powder. So this is not like a huge market, but just as a demo, right? We've even made crayons. Another big use is rubber. So your tires are also black, because your tire by content, that rubber by content is about 30%. This is rubber made with our carbon black. And yeah, so there's all sorts of applications that this carbon can be used to. But I think the key thing, right, is now it's an economically valuable product. We sell our carbon for a profit. We're not spending money to get rid of CO2 as a waste and storing it into the ground. And so that changes the whole economics of what you can imagine to deal with this issue of carbon.
Well, and I love how you're turning it into other things, because there's a whole industry growing out there where people are just capturing it, like you said, storing it in the ground. Like what can you turn it into for a profit? And I mean, if you think the amount of roadways that are out there are rubber, I mean, how many cars do we have out there, right? Like that could be a huge industry. Can you use it for like thinking of more construction, like cement?
Oh yeah. So cement is one of the newer applications for this. So to give you a sense, right, this is cement we've made with some of our carbon black inside. Mm-hmm. So it actually strengthens the cement, which is really cool, because that means you can use less cement, you save money. And also cement is one of the highest CO2 emitting parts of concrete. And so you're also offsetting that CO2 emission. But it does have some side effects, primarily of which is it turns the concrete black. So we're also exploring this market application, but I'm sort of assuming that it'll have to go into places where the concrete is not visible because people are just not used to
Or maybe
dark
it's okay.
colored concrete.
I mean, with cement, I've talked about this on a previous episode too. I mean, it's the second most consumed substance on the planet next to water.
Yep.
And so, man, I mean, if you could just tap into that, I mean, there's a huge application for that right there. And I think cement's just interesting because back to reinventing, we're still using the same cement mix that was invented from like
Portland cement. It's ancient.
and like the 1700s, right? Like it's the same mix. And so I often think about feedstock. I often think a lot about our waste stream and trying to figure out like, okay, how do you kind of take that value that's still in that waste stream and reroute it back into other things? And kind of like what you're doing, which is great because now you have a truly circular economy.